Welcome to another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast. Today we have Coach Adam Wilson with us. Coach is most recently the tight ends coach and special teams coordinator at South Cobb High School in Austell, Georgia. And if you don't know where that is, just think south of Atlanta. Or was it west? Remind me, Coach.
It's west.
There we go. Sorry. See, I already butchered that part up. So, Coach, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing all right. It's as I said to you earlier, it's tiring setting up a bunch of stuff. So by the time this comes out, it'll be out that I've helped with our state association's state clinic. If you did not see that, you can go ahead and look that up. It's very affordable, and they're just going to leave everything on the association website. The goal at the time of this recording is 150 speakers, and I think we're at like 80 or so. College and high school coaches. So I mean, it's a really good lineup. In all honesty, they're still finalizing some guys, and I'm still getting emails throughout the day. So my goal is to have all that finalized by the next week and who we got. So yeah. So kind of, Coach, how did you end up at before we get into kick return? How did you end up at South Cobb?
So I first started helping out when I was in college at West Georgia. I was a student assistant for 2 years and a graduate assistant for 1. And then I got a job at Heritage High School in Conyers. And I worked there for a year as the 9th grade offensive coordinator and helped out on Fridays. And then I got a job at Paulding County High School, coaching tight ends. That was my first time, having my own position group and really working with the varsity all the time. So that was a good experience, and I was there for 3 years, and then I got the job at South Cobb 2 years ago. So I just finished up my second season there.
Awesome, Coach. What was kind of like that transition for you, like going from West Georgia to the high school ball?
It was definitely different. Obviously having not worked at the high school level before, it was kind of a big transition. But it was something that, I really wanted to do. And it was kind of difficult to get a job for me. When I was coming out, I ended up emailing everybody within an hour and a half of where my fiance was living at the time. And got a bunch of answers back from that. But Heritage was just a really good fit for me.
Good.
But yeah, it was a big transition because, at that school, I had the opportunity to basically take the 9th grade program over, being a first-year coach. So it was a great learning experience getting thrown in the deep end.
Well, I know how that is, Coach. My 3rd year, I took over a freshman program, and it's an interesting experience, and it's a learning experience. You learn a lot of what not to do during that time, and like, oh yeah, I need to do this better. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, Coach, and Coach is going to talk some double wedge middle return today. Kind of like normal. We'll kind of let him talk, and I'll throw my bad witty banner here and there, and questions as we go, or questions at the end, and kind of just let him do his thing. Like I said, as I told him before we came on, my biggest goal with this podcast is kind of just be a special teams resources for guys, and like I said, whether it's somebody clinicking on more of a clinic style or more of a conversation, an interview, kind of Q&A, like that's kind of the focal point. And I mean, we'll kind of see how stuff evolves in the next couple months. But like I said, I just appreciate Coach coming on. So Coach, the floor is yours, sir.
All right, guys, so this is what we're looking at. So I'll kind of give you a background before I get started about, how I got to become the special teams coordinator and, what I try to do and some of the culture stuff and all that. So I actually became, I didn't get hired to be the special teams coordinator. I got hired to be the tight ends coach. And then, we started working on special teams. I guess this was middle of July, and realized pretty quickly that if we were going to have any success, we needed one guy to take it over. And so I just kind of volunteered for it. And, I'd worked with special teams a little bit when I was at Paulding County, but, never to this degree to kind of take it over. And, I just tried to run with it as best I could. And so South Cobb is one of those schools where, when I got there originally, special teams was kind of looked down on. And so part of what I've tried to do is change that and kind of change the mindset of the kids and kind of get them to be excited about being on it. Because I think, with special teams, that's one of the first things you have to do is focus on that unit culture. Because if you can't get kids to buy in and, play at 100%, then, the team across the way that you're playing, they may be bought in, and then, obviously they're going to have more success. So like I said, some of the ways that we've done it is, man, just be excited about it, show the kids that you're prepared, and, that you took the time over the weekend to have a game plan in place, and that you're organized and excited about it. And, that just rubs off on them. So, and then the two biggest things that I always preach is attitude and effort. So right here, you see our scheme right here. I'm really simple when it comes to special teams because, we're in Georgia and we're a 6A program, but we're not one of those schools that has a ton of depth. So we have to use a lot of guys that play on Fridays on offense and defense on special teams. So on special teams, I like to keep it fairly simple. All right. So that's kind of how we got to the middle wedge right here. So you can see the scheme. It's pretty simple. Some of the times we'll change the R3 and the L3 right there, change their aiming point to where they can split the difference in between the numbers and the hash. But a lot of times we've had them go to the hash and been pretty successful there.
Now, Coach, when you're teaching this, what are you telling? I mean, 'cause we run a similar scheme on ours. So a couple quick questions. What is your biggest teaching point for that front? What I'd call it your group of 6 up there.
Yeah, the biggest teaching point is to turn and run, man, because a lot of times they get kind of hesitant. And, I mean, you kind of have a ways to go. You kind of have a distance to go. So you really just have to turn and run. And, they're trying to eye the guy on kickoff the whole time. And the biggest thing is to just tell them, look, you got to turn and run and get to your point. And then once you're there, then you can locate that guy running towards you.
Okay. And then if somebody's kicking off the hash, do you make it more of a hash return?
We'll get close. A lot of times what I'll tell them is the near hash. So let's say in this situation where I have the kickoff team drawn up, the ball's on the hash right there. And normally from what we've seen is if they put it on the hash, they'll kick it straight down the hash.
Yeah.
And so, generally what we say is we don't want to go all the way to the far hash because generally there's not going to be enough time for that. So we'll look at some clips here. See guys doing good stuff, see them doing it right, because I think that's probably the best way to show it off. So we see these 3 guys right here, right? We're turning and running. We've gotten back to our landmark. All right, then we sink in our hips and explode through right there. And one of the most important things with this return is you have to have returners that are going to hit it. You can't have guys back there that are going to dance or they're not going to follow the scheme and they'll try to take it, around the numbers or anything like that until you break through, right? Like we did on that one right there. We'll show it again. Because obviously, if they try to take it to the numbers, they're not going to have any blocking, especially if they try to go to the far number or whatever right there. So you've got to have disciplined returners that kind of buy into the scheme. And luckily this year, 2 years ago, we did right there. You see how fast those guys are running right there just to get back to the spot. One of the most important things, obviously, with that front line, right, is they have to ensure the kick. You don't want any surprise onside kicks or anything like that. Getting good job of sinking in the hips.
Now,
getting a body on a body right there.
What is the biggest way people try to combat you? Do they just try to squib it?
We really haven't seen too much of that. until this past year, actually our last game of the season, we were actually using some backups because it was the last game and the head coach wanted to play all seniors. So I had to completely change up who we were playing on special teams. And what a team ended up doing is they did an excellent job. They were a playoff team, and I can't stress what a great job they did. So normally teams really can't squib it because there's nowhere to squib it to. That's part of the reason that I put these two guys back a little bit, so that way there's no major holes. Well, they did a great job. They managed to get it right in between with perfect accuracy, right in between this guy and this guy, okay? And they ended up recovering it because this guy, not this particular kid on the screen, but the guy that was playing this spot, unfortunately, was not able to catch the ball right there. So that's probably what I would say would be the biggest issue. What we ended up doing was just moving everybody up 5 yards, and that seemed to fix it, where they started kicking it deep and we didn't have to deal with it again. But that's probably the best job that I've seen in terms of combating it. Like I said, just inside the hash there. That's really what we try to tell the returners is you need to make sure that you're in between the hashes. And you're going to want to get north probably within the first few steps. He does a really good job right here, getting north and getting what you can. And like I was talking about with the relentless effort part, just working to stay on your blocks opens up a good opportunity right here. This is a good look about the second level right here. Okay, on that wedge. This is what happens when the wedge doesn't quite come together like they should right there. This wing right here has got to do a better job of running to the middle guy right here. That's what we tell our two wings is right. They need to get really tight right there to the middle guy.
Now, would you want your back wedge to get a little tighter than that if possible?
Yeah, if possible. If possible.
I like I said, we run something similar. So that far guy, it's going to be a little hard for him to get there sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just asking. We try to get as tight as possible, then let it burst.
Yeah, we're the same way. We would like to see him a little bit tighter right there. Good job of getting what you can right there.
Now, in terms of how do you drill that front line in practice?
So normally in practice, what we'll do is a lot of times we'll split up, especially this front group, and we'll drop into the spot. I'm a big guy where I like to break down the different techniques and break down the different pieces of it. Running back to that spot, to me, that's something that has to be drilled separately.
Yeah.
Is dropping to that spot really quickly. All right. And then once you're there, how do you get hands on the guy and drive him? And I think if you break that down, and then you can kind of piece it back together. And it's not anything fancy. Like I said, I mean, with drill work in general, even when it comes to my tight ends, I don't believe in fancy drills. Just drilling exactly what you're going to have to do and break it down piece by piece.
Yeah.
And just get really good at the parts of it and then put it together. Another really simple thing that we've done to get kids to buy in is just buying Gatorades for the unit. If they do a really good job, we bought wings before, like when we got that touchdown on the very first play that I showed. We got a whole bunch of wings. We got like 100 wings or something like that.
Now, when you install this, do you just do it on the field, or do you show them clips in the classroom first? In a normal year, I'll phrase it that way.
Yeah, like you said, in a normal year. So unfortunately, we weren't able to get the meeting time that I would have liked this year. Last year it was a little bit easier, so we were able to install it in the classroom first. But I think that's one of those things at the high school level. Like, you'd always want more time.
Yeah.
I know the guys at the college level probably feel that way too. But yeah, we normally install it in the classroom first, and then kind of walk through it, and then run through it, and like I said, break it down part by part. One of the things that you'll see too with kids on kickoff return is not using their hands enough. There were a few kids right there. They got to do a better job of using their hands, striking and driving right there. One of the big things that we stress. Making sure they drive their feet when they make contact.
Do you know off the top of your head how many yards you average on the return this year? A rough idea?
Man, I could look it up. I want to say probably around 30.
Yeah, that's what as I'm seeing the return yards up top. I see a lot, like 25 to 35.
Mm-hmm. Good job there, striking and driving. So this is like a situation where, like you were talking about, where the wings got to do a better job of coming with that middle guy right there.
Yeah.
He's just kind of like hopping right here. He needs to be right there on his hip.
Yeah. Well, because if you did it there, then you probably wouldn't have to avoid that first initial guy the way he did.
Yeah.
So.
One of the cool things this year was because of Corona and just the lack of depth that we have, we got to use a lot of freshmen on Fridays. And that was really satisfying because, man, those kids were bought in, only being 14 years old and getting to play on Fridays. And, they were only doing special teams, but, man, they were making the most out of it.
Yeah.
This team had a really good kickoff unit. It was hard to get anything against them. They were like bats out of hell, man, flying down the field. This is kind of a situational thing that you got to be prepared for, I think. After like a huge penalty, just making sure your guys know how to line up on kickoff return. Because you don't want to be in a situation where you've never practiced it and then they're like trying to figure out, well, where do I stand? You know, do I line up any differently? That type of stuff.
Yeah.
Good job of driving by that kid right there. In terms of game prep too, one of the things that I like to do for kickoff return is chart all their kicks. If they're a team that likes to mix it up, we see a good variety in Georgia. Like there's some teams like this is Dalton. When we played them, they didn't change the whole year. They did the exact same kick every time, put it on the same hash every time. So that week was a little bit easier, but you'll see some teams and they scatter it all over the place. So like to all that, and that way, you know, in practice we know kind of where they're going to put it, and we get to practice different situations.
Oh yeah, like high school kicking can be erratic as it is, but especially I mean, you can see a lot by charting. Now for high school punting, I just set that paper on fire. That's useless. That's useless, at least in our state.
Yeah.
Like
no, it's like that here too.
It's like sweet
Absolutely.
God. It's like I did that my first year. I charted every punter every week. I want to pull my hair out by the end of the year. Like it's just like this is just abysmal. That's why at a certain point I was just like my returner. Here's how many yards you need to stay in the way. Outside that, good luck. This is a little more accurate. The only team I had a problem with this year was like Xenia. Xenia's the only one because they can kick it they still squib it, pop it about anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They did a really good job. And then Beaver Creek, who we had at the end of the year, was a little bit of a problem too, but they essentially squibbed and onside every time. So, I mean,
yeah, that can be unpredictable.
Yeah, that's what we just do the hands team essentially out against them. So.
Mm-hmm.
But the rest of these teams, you can get a really good idea of where they're going to kick to.
The example right there of the returner not being disciplined. Probably should have gotten more out of that. If you look at that big hole right there in the middle.
Yeah. Plant your foot and cut up.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're still probably going to get tackled probably roughly about, maybe same spot, maybe a little bit more. But if you just break one tackle, you just got green grass there instead of. I mean, it's kind of like I had a conversation with Corey Gardner yesterday. I mean, we talked about spilling on defense. Like I would much rather force somebody to go east and west than north and south. Like
absolutely.
So if you're going to keep running sideways, that's fine with me.
Absolutely. Another example right there of it. Same thing, like we were just talking about. Much rather you go east and west. Especially if you're a better athlete.
Yeah. How much practice time did you get during the week last year?
So we get for kickoff return, we get about, probably 10 minutes a day. Well, 10 minutes twice a week. And then, obviously the walkthrough on Thursday. So not a ton of time, but, enough to get some things done.
Why did I never asked you why you did this, but why is this the return scheme you guys kind of went to?
I think we just kind of went to it just because it's simple, and it's balanced. It doesn't really matter like what kind of kick you get. You can always kind of take it back to the middle of the field and try to bust it through right there.
Okay. And then on top of that, how much turn? Obviously, you mentioned last week there you kind of put a bunch of different kids in because the seniors playing, but how much turnover did you have throughout the season because of COVID on at least on this unit?
Yeah, we were really fortunate with COVID. We had to reschedule one game, but other than that, we were really lucky with COVID. So it really wasn't because of that. Now we did have a lot of injuries throughout the season,
Okay.
And that kind of made for some interesting Friday nights where you're having to put different kids in, especially when you look out there and you've got 5 freshmen out there, because, this year we were in a situation where our sophomore and junior classes were smaller. So we had to rely on those freshmen a lot, but they did a great job. Luckily, like I said earlier, they took pride in it.
Okay. Personnel-wise, what were you kind of looking for from the front six?
You go back to the first slide here.
I think you may have had it in there, or at least something kind of similar, but I can kind of build off
front
that.
line guys, like the middle guys,
Yeah,
those are going to be, your linebackers. If you got some really fast edge guys.
Yeah.
So this will probably help you right here. But these 2 guys right here, right, that's going to be your linebacker, your pass rusher guys. But it's and really everybody on here's got to be able to run. Like I don't believe in putting guys on here that can't run. Like I just think it's too hard. These 2 guys on the edge here, they've got to be really good athletes. Those are normally like your DBs, safeties, because they've got a really far distance to run. I mean, they're at the number, right? And they've got to run all the way back here to the hash or splitting the difference right here. And that's a pretty far distance. So generally those are your DB speed guys. These guys are probably your slower guys, because obviously they don't have as far to run. So like I had one of my tight ends on there this year, a linebacker. I've used linebackers. I've used like safeties, those kind of bodies right there. Obviously, your wings will be faster guys because some teams will squib it to the wings. Like you were talking about, what teams did. A lot of teams will try to do that. Luckily, we had good success with those guys of catching the ball and getting what they could out of it.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things that teams did to stop us from getting as explosive a return.
Yeah.
Kind of one of their answers. But like I said, yeah, we would use pretty good athletes right there, running backs, DBs, wide receivers, if they can block.
Well.
And then the guy in the middle right here, the up back, we used a linebacker right there, but he was a pretty good athlete. I've used bigger running backs and stuff like that. So, and then obviously your returners are just your 2 best athletes that can catch.
Yeah, that's the key there. That's catching and tracking the ball there, Coach. Now, we kind of talked about earlier about like the front line guys and what that drill you did with them. What about the back 3 there?
Yeah, the back 3, it's a similar type drill where we're talking about breaking it down and just practicing on them coming together in different situations, no matter where the ball's kicked. That's probably the biggest thing, like we saw in some of those clips. That's still an area that we constantly have to work on. But like I said, just breaking it down into parts so that way, they can come together right there.
All right, Coach. Well, I mean, and just kind of, do you have any closing thoughts on the kick return before we start wrapping up, Coach?
Closing thoughts. Not really.
The big
I would say
big question.
just find something that works for your kids. That would be my biggest advice is find something that works for your kids and be excited about it, right? Like special teams shouldn't be one of those things that's like a punishment or for guys that are not starters or whatever. Like try to find a way to make it fun and exciting in your program.
Now, see, and I'll follow up on that, like, because you mentioned earlier about like wings and stuff for the unit. How else did you create buy-in besides obviously the food?
Like I said, I would say, and I mentioned this earlier, the special teams player of the week buying Gatorades, you would be amazed how excited high school kids get for Gatorades. And then I would just say, too, the energy that you bring every day. If you're excited to be there and you're organized and you have a plan, then I think the kids will buy into what you're trying to get them to do.
Yeah. So, all right, Coach. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Coaches, his contact information, if I could speak right now. Coaches, his contact information will be in the bio. If you're watching, like I said, there's kind of where he's at and located and all that. But like I said, his Twitter and all that stuff will be in the bio. Obviously, same thing for our normal listeners on the podcast apps, Anchor and Spotify. His contact information will be in there. I think at this point, most people are probably watching on YouTube anyway, just because of the visuals. But either way, his contact information is about. Please reach out to Coach, give him a follow. If you have any questions about special teams or tight ends, just reach out to Coach. And then, like normal, subscribe. It helps the channel, it helps people find the videos, and it helps continue to make this thing grow into what it is. I want to thank everybody for listening. And this was another episode of the Kick and Cover Podcast.